Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining TierOne Travel's exclusive series, Keeping the Dream Alive. My name's Shelley Perry, and I'm General Manager at TierOne Travel, and tonight we're sticking to both closer to home and off the beaten trail. Adventure Canada is one of TierOne Travel's newest preferred suppliers, and we couldn't be more pleased to feature this Canadian-born company. Adventure Canada began in 1987 and now features small ship expeditions to Canada's Arctic, Atlantic, and Pacific Northwest, along with the Antarctica, European, and South and Central America itineraries, not to mention the various land tours they offer as well. A little name dropping here, Adventure Canada has brought Robert Bateman aboard to travel the West Coast, introduced David Suzuki to cruising the Arctic, captivated Farley Mowat with the beauty of Labrador, and Margaret Atwood has now traveled with Adventure Canada more than a dozen times. We have tonight Martin Aldrich from Adventure Canada, and he'll be sharing with us in further detail all that this gem of a company can offer. As Business Development Manager for Adventure Canada, Martin travels all over the world presenting their expeditions, but his talents don't end there. No. While on board the Ocean Endeavour, he takes on the role of Zodiac driver and a member of the expedition team. So tonight we're in for a real treat. Martin, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Shelley. A pleasure to be here this evening. There's a lot to cover. I don't expect to cover everything, so if you have any questions, you can save them till the end if you prefer. You can put them into the chat box on the GoToWebinar platform, and I'll try to answer those as I have time. I do have a video that I'm going to show in just a few minutes, and I've got a little bit of a headache tonight. I apologize, so I may not be moving super fast through the material, but we'll get started at the beginning. How about that? So yes, I'm a business development and account manager with Adventure Canada when I'm in the office. Currently the office is my home in North Vancouver, and I'm also an expedition guide and Zodiac driver on board the Ocean Endeavour when we're out on expedition. I'm pictured here on the right side of the screen driving Centaurus, and that's one of my favorite places to be. And one of my favorite things to see is this expression on one of our clients' faces, landing into the Little Bay Islands in Newfoundland, just ecstatic to be on the land and getting into a new place, and a new place in Canada especially. So I actually joined the company through my family, and my parents were able to join once I started working with Adventure Canada in 2018. They came on board for Heart of the Arctic, or sorry, in 2017 that was Heart of the Arctic, and in 2018 we were in Newfoundland. They also came on board for High Arctic Explorer. So Adventure Canada is very much so a family company. And you can see the original family here, including Matthew Swan on the left in the middle, and a number of the original founding members and expedition team, as well as David Suzuki on your top of your screen there as well, who was one of the early resource staff for Adventure Canada. The company is still family run, Canadian owned and operated, and it is Matthew Swan's three offspring that now run the company. So Cedar on the left is our CEO, Alana on the right is our head of product, and Matthew James in the middle there is the head of the director of business development. You can see a number of the different awards that we've won over the years on the bottom of our screen, and for the 4th year running now, Best Adventure Cruise Line, which is a Reader's Choice Award. And that really goes a long way to say how much our clients really enjoy our company and what we offer. And really that has to do with the small ship, big adventure aspect of what we do. It's very dynamic, it's fluid in nature. So while we have an intended itinerary for all of our expeditions, you're very likely to see that will change. We'll capitalize on wildlife sightings. We're going to be changing our plans for a lot of different reasons. It could be weather, but often it will be really to capitalize on the best possible experience for our guests. There's no driving between our destinations, so you only have to unpack once. We have 30 or more guides on board, so that's the resource staff, expedition guides, and that's on top of 100 staff, sorry, I should say crew for the ship. We have access to all the parks and museums and the places that we visit, and in those 30 guides, or 30 or more guides, we actually are going to be hosted by a number of locals. So when we're in Newfoundland, you're going to have local resource staff on board. When we're in the Canadian Arctic, you're going to have Inuit staff on board. So it's a really great way to see all the different places that we visit, many of them that are only accessible by sea. There are 3 different aspects to an expedition cruise, and this is the way that we operate. We have Zodiac cruising, expedition landings, and community visits. So they're pretty self-explanatory, but a Zodiac cruise will be anywhere from about 45 minutes to approximately 2 hours or so, depending on the place that we're at. If it's icebergs or perhaps looking for polar bears, we will be out in the Zodiacs for the duration of this excursion, so it's a good idea to have your wet weather gear on, not necessarily because it's going to be raining, but mainly just because there could be a little bit of chop and you may get little splashes from over the side of the Zodiac. They're very sturdy, very stable, so there's nothing to worry about there, but just always important to stay nice and warm and dry. We have our expedition landings. So this is where we're going from the ship to the shore with those Zodiacs again, and we do have over 20 Zodiacs on board the ship, so that means we can take all of the passengers off at the same time. I'll get to the ship in a little bit, but just so you know, the number of passengers on board would be a maximum of 198. And with those 20 Zodiacs, that allows us to get everybody off the ship at the same time. So we can be out on these expedition landings with a number of different excursions that are all explained on board the ship prior to leaving. Sometimes the night before, sometimes the morning of. You're going to have a number of different walks that are based on intensity levels. So something on a shore amble, something that's shorter. A few options in the middle distance, so something 2 to 4 kilometers, and maybe something 4 to 6, as well as probably a longer hike as well. But we also offer excursions on our expedition landings that are going to be based on interest level. So we have a large team, as you heard, 30 to 35 staff. That means that we have an ornithologist on board. So you can head out with the birder and look for birds. You can head out with the botanist and look at the different plants in the area that we're in. You could head out with the artists, maybe painting on plein air. You could head out with the historian and learn more about the historic sites. There's an archaeologist, so you could learn about the archaeology sites that may be present in the different places that we go to. And I'm just really scratching the surface. There are so many different options. And again, it's very fluid, it's very dynamic. There's a lot going on. Sometimes it's difficult to take it all in, but no stress. This is a vacation, and you're out there to enjoy yourself. One of the best aspects of our trips would be the community visits. Getting to places that are not easy to get to really by flying in and driving. A lot of the places that we visit don't have an airport. Some places don't even have roads in from the outside. Places like Francois and Newfoundland, or of course many of the places in the Canadian Arctic. If you're wondering where we're looking at here, this is Trout River near Gros Morne in Newfoundland. So in our community visits, not only do we have local staff that will be traveling with our passengers on board the ship and then on the excursions, but we also will hire local guides in the communities that we visit. So they will actually be from the places that we're visiting. They're going to be there with our passengers, taking them around their community and telling them all about what it's like to live in this place. Really wonderful to be invited into someone's home and to have tea. They're often quite small places, so sometimes we're the same number of people coming into the community as live in the community, but that doesn't normally hinder the experience. It's always a lot of fun getting into communities and seeing how different people live. So I mentioned the Ocean Endeavour is our vessel. Again, 198 guests maximum, 20 Zodiacs. We do have a couple extra in reserve as well. It's 137 meters long. So I'm out here in BC, I'm in North Vancouver, and we have BC ferries here. This is a very similar size to the Sunshine Coast Ferry, if you've ever taken that. One really great feature of the Ocean Endeavour is we actually have 4 side gates, meaning there are 2 gangways essentially that fold down from the side of each side of the vessel. So that means there are 2 on the port and 2 on the starboard side. So that means we can load and unload 2 Zodiacs at the same time on each side. Really, really fast operation. All 200 passengers easily off the ship within about 30 to 40 minutes. Just really, it speeds up as we get used to it. First day's always a little bit slower. Number of different cabins on board, and you probably noticed when I talked about the awards that I didn't touch on our solo traveler award. We take up to about 25% solo travelers who do not pay a single supplement. So if you've been on a cruise before and you've paid 1.5 times or 2 times the price to get your own cabin, well, we don't do that at Adventure Canada. We have up to 50 cabins set aside on all of the different expeditions that I'm going to talk about. Of course, they're very popular as you're getting the same cabin, but not having to pay a supplement. But certainly, if you're interested in that, you can talk with your Tier 1 specialist, and they're going to be able to advise you all about our solos and what's available. I can tell you there's not a ton available next year for 2022, but 2023 is looking pretty promising. So you can see a few of the different cabin categories here. There are 10 cabin categories ranging from shared occupancy quad cabins in category 1 to triple share in category 2. And then we start into those single cabins in category 3, and we have singles in category 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We start to get to exterior cabins in category 4, and then we get into our suites in category 6. All of these cabins, even the shared occupancy, all have ensuite bathrooms. Some of the cabins in category 6 and 7 actually have 2 bathrooms, so great if a couple of friends want to share and have their own bathroom, or maybe it's, yeah, anyway, there's 2 bathrooms in some of the cabins. I'll let your imagination go wild with what I was thinking there. Here are a few of the different lounges in the ship. We have 3 different lounges as well as the main restaurant. So the Polaris restaurants where we're going to have 3 meals a day included as well. We also have afternoon tea. There's a library as well as 2 different bars as well. We source local provisions along the way, and so we try to enjoy as many local traditional dishes as possible. It's really quite a comfortable ship away from home. So lots of modern amenities in terms of amenities. We have a gym, we have a heated saltwater pool, hot tub, there are 2 saunas, we have stretching and yoga classes daily, as well as a full spa, which offers massages and manicures and all the fun things. We have barbecue lunches out on deck, so you can take in a barbecue lunch and have a burger and a beer outside of Franceway in Newfoundland, pictured here. But we also have a lot of presentations. It's very educational on board. So while much of the focus is obviously about getting off the ship, but when we are repositioning between places, there are going to be workshops looking at a range of topics from photography to marine biology to history. We're going to have presentations out on the deck, but also in our main lounge, so you can hear more about perhaps it's the geography of the place, or maybe the archaeologist is going to prep you for the archaeology site that we're about to go to. Again, with that large team, we have a lot of opportunity for one-on-one experiences, small groups, regardless. We're about 1 to 7, so 1 staff to 7 passengers. That's for staff to passenger ratio, but remember we have 100 crew, so we're about almost a 2 to 1 ratio, so you're well taken care of when you're on board. You can see on the bottom left there would be an example of our staff number, and this would be from our Greenland and Wild Labrador expedition, and a number of those staff there are from Labrador themselves. Again, I did mention this earlier on, but we'll have artists on board, and they are going to be unique for each trip as well. And that goes for all of our staff. We're typically just hiring our staff per trip. So again, as you're imagining, when you have a local staff and you're in Newfoundland, you're going to have a Newfoundland staff. When we start to do the coast of Labrador, we're going to have staff that's from the coast of Labrador. So it does change each trip. We're going to have a professional photographer or 2 on board each of the trips. We are sponsored through Nikon, and we have a Nikon camera share program on board. That means that you can actually borrow Nikon cameras, high-end digital SLRs and different lenses. So if you already have your own Nikon camera body, you can try out different lenses. This is free of charge. We will, as I mentioned, run workshops. You're going to be able to talk to the ambassador on the land and learn how to take better photographs. Our musician will be there to entertain you out on the land, but also, of course, on the ship as well with nightly presentations, nightly tunes. But really, you know, it's all about getting off the ship. And so that's just the brief intro into how Adventure Canada operates, why we're an award-winning company. And I am going to dive into our itineraries next. However, prior to doing that, I'm just going to pull up a video so that you get a full understanding of exactly how we will be operating. So this is a day in the life on board with Adventure Canada.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Time is currently 0600 on Saturday, August the 29th. Our current position is 74 degrees, 47 minutes north, 83 degrees, 15 minutes west. Outside temperature is sitting at 8 degrees Celsius or 46 degrees Fahrenheit. We have a wonderful day of glacier cruising, wildlife viewing, and hiking the Arctic tundra. It's time to get up and enjoy this beautiful landscape. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
You can read books, you can watch TV shows, but when you're out here on the tundra yourself, listening to people who really know what they're talking about, it's a whole different world.
Okay, so there is just a brief overview what it's like to be on board with Adventure Canada. I'm going to keep my webcam off for the remainder here so you can see the whole screen in entirety. What you can see on your screen now is the full overview for our 2022 season. So you can see a number of different colored lines. They're all color-coded to the legend on the left. So the red line, the mighty St. Lawrence down in the St. Lawrence off of Quebec there. We have Atlantic Canada Explorer, the gold or bronze color off of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Obviously, Newfoundland circumnavigation we are running twice. So that's the orange line around Newfoundland. Then we jump up into the heart of the Arctic, so southern Baffin Island and Greenland on our Heart of the Arctic expedition with that blue line. We run the High Arctic Explorer twice with the green line that starts in Greenland, goes to Resolute, and then the return journey from Resolute to Greenland. Into the Northwest Passage is the pink line that goes from Greenland to Kugluktuk. And then we have out of the Northwest Passage from Kugluktuk to Kangerlussuaq, Greenland. And the last trip of the season is our Greenland and Wild Labrador trip from Kangerlussuaq down the coast of Greenland, down the coast of Labrador, and finishes in St. John's, Newfoundland. So each of these trips, as you can see, is really just run once or sometimes twice, depending on the trip. They're run as a series, so one set date, run back to back. So you could stay on board for the entire season if you'd like to. We have had people do that in the past. About 4 months, so certainly a bit of time on board of a ship. I am going to just briefly cover the different trips as we're covering the Canadian coastlines. So really just hoping to maybe open your eyes to some of the places you hadn't thought about going to in Canada, covering some of the highlights of these trips and giving you an idea again of where we go. So these East Coast trips here, the Mighty St. Lawrence and Atlantic Canada Explorer, as well as Newfoundland Circumnavigation, will be the first trips in our 2022 season. And I'm going to just run through each one not day by day, I'm actually going to just cover the highlights, but I'll just give you somewhat of a brief day by day to begin here. So we're going to start in Quebec City. We have a coach transfer, that's what the dotted line means, out to the Saguenay Fjord, where we join the Ocean Endeavour in Tadoussac. We then head out into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. We visit Reeford Gardens. We head over to Havre St. Pierre, and we visit the Mingnan Archipelago. We then go to the Gaspé region, and we visit Forillon National Park. We then head down to Bonaventure Islands, and we go to Pierce Rock. We stop into Summerside and PEI, a stop into the Magdalen Islands. Typically, there's a stop on the south coast of Newfoundland as well before we end in St. Pierre, Newfoundland. Just so you know as well, each of these dots does not represent just a single day. Sometimes we will have multiple stops in a day. We also may stop into places that are not indicated on the maps. And you'll especially see that in the Arctic, where we have maybe 6 dots on a 17-day trip. We'll be getting off every single day, really, unless we have a day at sea. So just be mindful of that. We are getting off the ship every day as long as it's possible. So we stop into the Mingnan Archipelago, just outside of Havre St. Pierre. We visit the islands from there. These are covered in sea stacks. So these sea stacks are carved by the motion of the ocean, and of course our rock specialists, our geologists on board, are going to be absolutely ecstatic to be here to tell you all about this National Park Reserve that stretches all along the river just outside of Havre St. Pierre. As I mentioned, in the Gaspé region, we'll go to Pierce Rock, the pierced rock here. We have a Zodiac cruise in and around the pierced rock before we then head to Bonaventure Island, still in the Zodiac, because they're actually relatively close together. We have a number of seals on the island, but the main draw would be the northern gannets that come here to breed. So there are about 110,000 pairs of birds that breed here every year. They have the largest wingspan in the northern hemisphere, so they are quite massive, these birds, and we get to see quite a number of them on Bonaventure Island. And then, as I mentioned, we also go to St. Pierre, so we're going to be visiting France without crossing the Atlantic, or at least not going too far out into the Atlantic. So this is literally a little bit of French territory. You can use euros. You can order French wine. You can see Citroën cars driving by with their European license plates. You can not expect the shops to keep to their hours. No, I'm just kidding. It is a very French place. It's very quaint, very, very nice to walk around, very peaceful and very colorful. Atlantic Canada Explorer is the next trip on the docket here. So this is going to be, Newfoundland Circumnavigation will actually be the next trip because we run it twice, and it is on either side of Atlantic Canada Explorer. So Newfoundland Circumnavigation will be the second trip. Atlantic Canada Explorer is the third trip. This trip will start in St. John's and end in St. John's. We will go straight down to Sable Islands. We'll actually have a day at sea here on our way south down to Sable Island, which is that crescent moon shape off the coast of Nova Scotia. It is a sandspit island that is, well, I'm going to explain it in just a minute, but a very interesting place, and it is a national park. We go through the Marine Gully, a marine protected reserve, before we get to Cape Breton and stop into Louisbourg, visiting the French fort there. We then head around Cape Breton to Chetty Camp and stop into the Cabots Trail there. We head to Prince Edward Island, and we're going to be going to Charlottetown. There's likely going to be a stop either into the Magdalen Islands and definitely a stop into the south coast of Newfoundland before St. Pierre again, and then up to St. John's. Again, I see 6 dots on the map here, but this is a 12-day trip. And we'll be getting off the ship every day, sometimes twice a day. So there will be more stops than that. Many of the stops will be planned, on the trip, as we have, again, wildlife sightings. But we are very adaptable, having been an expedition company now for over 30 years. So as I mentioned, Sable Island. This is a sandspit island off the coast of Nova Scotia, and what I did not mention are the wild horses that roam here. So there are over 400 wild horses. This is one of the last known places that wild horses do roam. There's also a number of gray seals that are here on the island that come back to breed every year as well. So those wild horses are quite picturesque, as you can see here from one of our Nikon professionals, Michelle Valberg's photo here. And as I mentioned, we do go into the French fort in Fort Louisbourg. This is recreated. This was, I think, originally built in about the early 1700s, and then it was reconstructed, I believe, twice. Most recently about in the 1970s. We do a private tour around the fort. We are going to be arranging a private lunch in the fort as well. So quite an interesting place to check out. Definitely our historian will be filling you in on all the details. So the Skyline Trail, another highlight for sure, getting up onto the Cabot Trail just outside of Chetty Camp. We'll be joined by Parks Canada here. Often the community in Chetty Camp will also welcome us into the community hall, and you can try out a lobster roll and have a local beverage as well. Okay, I mentioned Newfoundland circumnavigation. This is one of my favorites. It is very popular. We do run this trip every year, and this in 2022 we're actually running it twice. St. John's to St. John's, counterclockwise around the island. We do stop into a port every day or into an expedition landing location. I'm just going to cover really a few of the highlights, the main ones being all UNESCO World Heritage Sites, so Lanceau Meadows, Red Bay, and Gros Morne. Really the staff on board this trip really do take it home. This is what it's all about, the people in Newfoundland and the warm hospitality. We've had Alan Doyle from Great Big Sea, you can see him on the right. He was on board in 2018. I actually was the driver of the Zodiac as he was out taking passengers around singing sea shanties in the bay outside of Franceway back in 2018. That was a lot of fun. It was raining, but it was a lot of fun. And our Newfoundland circumnavigation is designated as a Canadian signature experience. That's from Destination Canada. We've been going to Newfoundland for over 25 years, and most of the staff that join us for Newfoundland circumnavigation are all from Newfoundland and have been traveling with Adventure Canada for almost 20 years or more. So some of the original staff that started with us 25 years ago. As we are doing spring and summer trips this year, we do have a very good opportunity to see icebergs off the coast of Newfoundland. So really a big draw for a lot of people to go and see their first iceberg. Many of these coming from the Canadian Arctic as well as typically from the Western Greenland ice sheet. We have a Taste of Place program that expands our local dishes on board. So we will actually have many traditional sourced meals. So not only is the food coming from the local communities, but it is traditional Newfoundland food that we're actually, or meals I should say, that we're preparing on board. And I mentioned the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So we have Lanceau Meadows, that UNESCO World Heritage Site up in the very northern tip, just south of the Strait of Belle Isle. That is where we had the first confirmed Viking settlement in North America. It was actually, they actually were able to discover this location based on a close reading of the Viking sagas. So you can see the recreation of the timber and sod buildings there. Really quite an interesting place to walk around and picture Vikings here over 1,000 years ago. We go to Red Bay in Labrador, so this is actually just across the way from Newfoundland, and this was a Basque whaling station over 500 years ago, so another UNESCO World Heritage Site. This is where the Basque people from Spain, France area came over to do some whaling, and they were taking that whale blubber, refining it into oil, putting it into barrels, and shipping it back to Europe for use in lamps before we actually had electricity, before we could just flip a switch. And then Gros Morne, the tablelands, and Woody Point, definitely a huge highlight. So the tablelands you can see pictured in the back right there, so the flat red rock. This is the Earth's mantle that's pushed up through the crust and exposed itself. This is a very harsh land, the tablelands itself, not what you're seeing in the foreground. That's more of the Gros Morne area that is full of trails that we can hike around. But the actual tablelands themselves, they actually use that area. NASA uses that area because it's very similar to the conditions that are found on Mars. So we get to visit the tablelands there. We also get to go to the Discovery Center, and you can hike up into the trails that are shown here in the foreground. And then François, I mentioned François a couple times. A really quaint little community, only accessible by sea. There is a small ferry that does come here, but there are no roads in and out, and there's not an airport either. I think it's about 87, 85 people that live here approximately. Depends if two people have moved away, I guess, possibly each year. And they were given the opportunity to vote to leave. They wanted to keep the town alive, and they did. They voted to keep, in 2013, they voted to not relocate and to keep living in François. And we're very happy for that. It is such a wonderful community visit, and it's such a warm welcome here. We have a full day in the community. We have the locals come on, some of the locals come on board the ship for dinner, and then we head back into the community in the evening, typically for a kitchen party where the locals will do a potluck. We have songs sung, we do some dancing. It's always a lot of fun to stop in François. So that covers our East Coast expeditions. That's the first 4 trips for the 2022 season, and definitely some big highlights there, as I mentioned. And these trips will occur before we then head up into the Canadian Arctic, including Greenland as well. So the first trip is the Heart of the Arctic expedition. I'm going to cover the Heart of the Arctic and the High Arctic Explorer first, and then I'll cover what else you would see by going on the Northwest Passage trips. The reason for that being the High Arctic Explorer is going to cover a very similar area, as it's a 12-day expedition. When you have the 2 Northwest Passage trips being 17 days, you're going to get that extra 5 days going further west into the Northwest Passage. So just a little bit more that we can cover on those trips. So Heart of the Arctic, so just below the Arctic Circle. This is focused a little bit more on Inuit art and community visits. That said, there are a number of locations that are pristine and prime for wildlife. I've had some of my best wildlife viewings on Heart of the Arctic. The High Arctic Explorer expedition is a little higher into, or a little further latitude, higher latitude, excuse me. We're above the Arctic Circle the entire time, getting up to about 76 degrees north. So jumping into the Heart of the Arctic, we have, after we leave Iqaluit, we're going to be flying up. So there is a charter flight that's also part of this expedition. That's going to be going from Ottawa up to Iqaluit. We head out of Frobisher Bay, and then one of the first stops that we have, great opportunity to see wildlife on the Lower Savage Islands, just off the southern tip of Baffin Island. The photos here are actually taken from my trip in 2017 when I was on board for Heart of the Arctic. We had a mother and a 2.5-year-old cub pictured on the left, just out on the sea ice, and this rather large toothed walker, walrus on the right, out on the sea ice as well. Really fantastic location for wildlife. As I mentioned, Inuit art and community visits are really the focus, though. So Kimmirut, a community of about 400. This is in a very small and narrow waterway, so really takes a smaller ship to get in here. Quite a that allows also, though, for quite a lot of protection to the community. It's a really great place to be out on deck when you're sailing into the community of Kimmirut. And what this community is actually really renowned for is it's quite a small community, but it has the Soper House building, which has a number of outstanding artworks and carvings that we can check out. So definitely something to put on your list if you're interested in Inuit art. So that's Kimmirut. Slightly, well, 4 times the size of Kimmirut would be Kinggate, also known as Cape Dorset, or formerly known as Cape Dorset. This is just a little bit further to the east, to the west, with about 1,500 people. And this was really where Inuit art really got its foothold and really started to find its presence. This is one of the oldest professional Inuit printmaking studios in Canada. It is the oldest professional Inuit printmaking studio in Canada, and you will have the opportunity as one of the passengers to visit this art studio. You can see how they use the lithography machines to produce their arts and produce their prints. It's really an incredible opportunity to see how Inuit art is produced. And of course, not only produce, but you can also purchase as well directly from the artist, which is really quite great and a great way to support the community as well and those artists. Okay, from here we're going to be heading across Hudson Strait. So Hudson Strait obviously going into Hudson's Bay. So this is going to be Nunavik, or the very northern tip of Quebec. And we're going to be visiting into Cape Diggs as well as Diggs Island. This is a great opportunity to see wildland caribou, polar bears, but also a number of different species of birds. We have kittiwakes, thick-billed murres, common murres, quite a number of species here. We head across Hudson Strait, or through Hudson Strait, and into Ungava Bay, and we visit Aquatuck Island. Aquatuck Island is named for the akpat, which is the thick-billed murre. This is quite a large island. It's about 900 square kilometers. It's mainly limestone, as you can see pictured here. We do a Zodiac cruise. We don't actually go onto the island, but a really, really great place to see those akpats, thick-billed murres, and of course, wherever there are akpats or thick-billed murres, there are always polar bears hunting. So a very good opportunity to see polar bears as well. And when I was here in 2017, I also had, we had walrus in the water around our Zodiacs as well. So that's pretty cool. So there you go. That's the Heart of the Arctic expedition. That's going to be July 21st to August 2nd in 2022. I mentioned there's charter flights. Those are an additional cost to the cost of the expedition, just so you know, but they're private flights for just our guests that go from, for this trip in particular, Ottawa to Iqaluit. And for the return journey, we go from Kangarooswak, Greenland, down to Toronto. So it is open jaw. You will need to find your way between Ottawa and Toronto. But that's a great way to see Ottawa and or Toronto. So that's Heart of the Arctic, 13 days in the height of the summer. We're 24 hours of sunlight here. Absolutely stunning locations that we're going to be visiting. High Arctic Explorer, again, a 12-day mini Northwest Passage trip. One of these trips, the first trip will be running to the west, and then the return journey heading east back to Greenland. One of my favorite trips, a great trip to get up into the high Arctic, but for a shorter time frame, because you can do this trip in about 2 weeks. It's 12 days with a day on either end. And I'm just going to cover a few of the highlights, but before I do that, we have about 4 days on the coast of Greenland. We have a day at sea before we cross over into the Canadian Arctic. And this is going to stop into Pond Inlet first before we head up Navy Board Inlet around Violet Island. Absolutely beautiful, and you'll see that in the next picture. We head into Lancaster Sound, and we'll be visiting a number of locations in the newly formed Marine Protected Reserve in Telleruptia Manga. So this is one of the newest formed and one of the largest marine protected areas in Canada. So great opportunity for seeing wildlife here. And then we go to a number of different wildlife and historic sites on Devon Island as well as Beechey Island before finishing in Resolute and flying back to Canada. This trip will go Toronto to Kangarooswak and Resolute to Ottawa. And I mentioned Violet Island across from Mitamatilik, and you can see that island in the background here in the community of Pond Inlet in the foreground. And the community members on his ATV. Whenever we are in Pond Inlet, the approximately 1,700 members of the community that live here will typically welcome us into the community hall. We'll have Arctic games shown to us. You can try some local fare, so you can try some dried Arctic char and some bannock. Always a lot of fun to mingle with the people of Pond Inlet. As I mentioned, if we head up into Lancaster Sound, we're going to be on Devon Island, and on Devon Island we have a historic site at Dundas Harbour, and this is the site of an old abandoned RCMP outpost. 3 constables opened this detachment in the 1920s, and it then became a Hudson's Bay Company outpost in the 30s, and it closed again in the 50s because of the remote nature of the place and how difficult it is to get in and out of there, especially considering the sea ice conditions that are quite variable. And we do still see variable ice conditions, so that is also one of the main reasons why we change our itinerary. You can have sea ice blow in with the wind or with the currents, or wind and currents, cover up a place, and then it'll be completely uncovered the next day. So it's quite changeable. We're very adaptable, and this allows us to see quite a lot, even though sometimes we may have a bit of sea ice. Speaking of sea ice, just a little bit further to the west from Dundas Harbour along Devon Island is Croker Bay. Croker Bay is one of my favorite places for Zodiac cruises. You can see that Tidewater Glacier hanging out in the bottom right there of that picture. And this is what it looks like when you're in a Zodiac and up a little bit closer. Quite a spectacular location. We will be able to get relatively close. The zoom lens on this camera does give it a bit of an appearance that we're right at the base of the sea ice here, or of the glacier here. But of course we do stick to safety protocols, and we are at a safe distance. It just looks like we're really close. That said, you know, we can have wildlife here, so we are always on the lookout. We almost every time, in fact, I think every time I've been to Croker Bay, we've had polar bears in the water and on the shoreline as well. Really fantastic place to do your polar dip. If you'd like to join the polar swim team, you can jump into the Arctic Ocean here. Your reward will be a nice shot of something as you come back out onto the ocean endeavor. You can see the extent of that glacier. It extends something like what's about 2 kilometers deep, I think, 1,900 meters or so, about 1,200 square kilometers. So really quite a massive ice cap on top of Devon Island there. And if you're interested in kayak, we do have a kayaking. We have a kayak program that's going to be on board all of the different expeditions, but you can actually see the kayakers here at Croker Bay, right along the front of that ice. And here are a couple polar bears, I guess 3 polar bears that were pictured in 2018 in Croker Bay. Really cute. These would be 1.5-year-old cubs with their mother. I also mentioned the historic site on Beechey Island. This is, if you're a history buff, this is where Sir John Franklin's men first overwintered in 1845. So Sir John Franklin took 2 ships from Britain over to conquer the Northwest Passage. They were never heard from again after they left Greenland in 1845. This was the first known location that they actually stopped into, and they found evidence of that. They found 3 shallow graves of 3 of his men that perished in that first winter. There is a 4th grave from a man who died on a subsequent rescue mission. There's also the remnants of the Northumberland House at the other end of the island that we can go and visit as well. That's where the subsequent rescue missions actually came to leave provisions in case Franklin came back to this location. In 2019, Adventure Canada was the first group of passengers, first and only group of passengers or tourists I should say, to ever actually go to the HMS Erebus, and we visited that on the Out of the Northwest Passage expedition. So we were actually directly above where the HMS Erebus was found. And that was in Queen Maud Gulf here, just around Joe Haven. So quite a cool opportunity. We took a few years to get there. It's not an easy place to find, not an easy place to get to, but we did get there in 2019. So that covers the 2 shorter Arctic trips, the Heart of the Arctic and High Arctic Explorer, and then the big one that we operate, the signature experience, is the 2 Northwest Passage trips. I was lucky enough to do the Northwest Passage for my first 3 years with Adventure Canada, 2015, 16, and 17. Really incredible to see the really remote parts of Canada, and I don't say that lightly. This is, I'm very lucky and quite privileged to be able to have done this, and I highly recommend it to anybody who has the desire to see places in Canada that very few people get to. It's really kind of undescribable, but I'll do my best and show you some pictures from my adventures. I haven't really said that, but a number of the photos that I've shown are pictures that I've taken over the last 6 years with Adventure Canada. I've also intermingled some professional photos just to make mine look like they're really good too. So I'll start with, well, I'm just going to jump into Coburg Island. So you can see on the map here, the very most northerly community that we visit is Grise Fjord, or Isowetuck. So Coburg Island is just to the south of there, and I'm going to just jump into there, and then I'll come back to the map at the end. But Coburg Island is very full of birds. So those birders, if you want to see all the different species in the Canadian Arctic, Cobourg Island is the place to go. Absolutely spectacular. Really, really beautiful colors on the cliffs as well from all the guana, and you will be surrounded by birds. Absolutely. Hard to see, but all the little black dots on the cliff face there are all some of the 2.5 million birds that are on Cobourg Island. Again, looking at a location that you wouldn't get to on High Arctic Explorer, Fort Ross is right at Bellot Strait. And Bellot Strait is the connection between continental North America and the archipelago of Nunavut. So unfortunately, I'm going to go back a bit here, sorry. So right where it says Prince Regent Inlet, this is Bellot Strait here. So this is the Boothia Peninsula, just above Joe Haven. This is the very top of continental North America. And there's a small little inlet through here that goes with very strong currents connecting the McClintock Channel and Prince Regent Inlet. So we go there and we visit a place called Fort Ross. This is where there's a Hudson's Bay Company outpost still open to be able to be used by scientists. Sometimes different expeditions will use it as well. We can check out the buildings, including the manager's building in the background as well. So quite an interesting spot to check out. There are a couple cairns in the distance as well from different expeditions that came here. Quite a spot that's steeped in history. I haven't really talked much about Greenland because we're talking about the Canadian coastline, but it is a really special place, and it is going to be visited on all of these Arctic trips as well as the Greenland Wildlife. So I just thought I would show you a little bit of what Greenland looks like. This is Umanak. This gives you a bit of reference for some of the size of the icebergs with that 137-meter ship and the much larger iceberg in the background. But you can also notice that the community is quite colorful. Lots and lots of care is taken in these communities to make sure that they're kept vibrant, and that's done really by painting the houses in the traditional way, even though the traditional way it may not be followed in some degree, and I'll explain that. The houses typically were painted based on the occupants or the person who lived inside of the house and their occupation. So you could find the doctor in the community because that was the I'm just making this up, but that was the blue house. They do continue to color and to paint the houses different colors and vibrant colors, but they no longer necessarily follow that procedure, the color based on the occupation. Still, it makes the communities very vibrant, and it also really does show you the difference between the Canadian Arctic and the communities, as well as the Greenlandic communities. And that's something that I would really keep in the forefront of your mind when you go on an expedition to the Arctic, to really just compare, how is the Danish government supporting the people in the Inuit people, especially in Greenland, versus how the Canadian government is supporting the Inuit in the Canadian Arctic. Of course, talking about the Arctic, it's important to mention that we will see the aurora typically in September. Very good opportunity to see them typically in and around that mid-September mark. So on the out of the Northwest Passage, it's a very good opportunity, as well as the next trip I'm going to talk about Greenland and Wild Labrador. And it's a decent opportunity on the into the Northwest Passage. We're starting into the Northwest Passage in August, and we're close to 24 hours of sunlight, and by the end of that trip we're about 12 hours a day and 12 hours of night. So we need enough dark night to be able to see the aurora, and of course we need those solar winds as well. But absolutely spectacular to be seen from the deck of the Ocean Endeavour. So I mentioned there's a lot to cover, and I certainly couldn't cover it all, and I'm still probably going to even go over time here, but there is a lot. There's a lot on each trip. I could probably spend an hour just talking about the passage, but I hope I piqued your interest. Certainly an incredible area to check out. Greenland and Wild Labrador is the last trip I'll talk about. I'm going to rush through this quickly. We're going to cover the coast of Greenland. We have a day at sea going over the Davis Straits to Labrador. We stop in 3 different days into the Torn Gap Mountains National Park. We stop into the abandoned community of Hebron and the vibrant community of Nain. We often stop into the Wanderstrands as well in Labrador. We stop into Lanso Meadows as well, that I talked about on our Newfoundland circumnavigation, and then finish in St. John's, Newfoundland. Highly, highly recommend going to the Torn Gap Mountains. Really, really beautiful part of Canada. Higher peaks than I thought. before I went there. I was quite surprised. Really, really spectacular scenery. Lots of pristine area where no people live. There are no people that actually live inside of the Torngat Mountains, so or not any large communities anyway. There may be some hunters in there. And this is Eclipse Sound that we get to do a Zodiac cruise up to a nice set of waterfalls. In the community of Nain, we often have the Moravian Brass Band playing for us. Really nice community to walk in and around and try some of the local food as well. I didn't mention, but we do go to TierOne National Park in Newfoundland and do a number of walks there in the national park. I talked about Lanso Meadows, those only confirmed Viking settlements in North America, the only confirmed, and the recreation of those timber sod buildings. Oh, and here's another photo of Terra Nova. I'm just going to skip ahead. This is going to be the very last slide from the trips. This is heading into St. John's. This is going through the Narrows, and then you've got the battery pictured here on the right. So this is the very last trip of our 2022 season, the Green Island Wild Labrador trip, finishing in Newfoundland. All of the different trips that I talked about, they've been on sale for a little while now, but we do have a special for Travel Canada by Sea up until November 30th. And it's a 15% promotion, and that is on all of the trips that you see here on the screen. So the Mighty St. Lawrence, Atlantic Canada Explorer, Newfoundland Circumnavigation, part of the Arctic, and the 2 High Arctic Explorer trips. So those trips are on special. But we also have an additional special for everybody that is here today. We can offer 20% on our Newfoundland Circumnavigation or the High Arctic Explorer in 2022. So certainly inquire with TierOne, your favorite travel advisor there, and they will be happy to let you know more about what's available. I can tell you that we have been selling very quickly, and that goes for all the different trips in 2022. But if you're interested in 2023, we did just launch that season, so those have just come out. It is a little bit of a different season, a little bit of a different look, but Newfoundland Circumnavigation, the High Arctic Explorer, the 2 Northwest Passage trips, and Green Island Labrador will occur in that season. So we have one more special for you tonight, and that is a chance to win a credit of $500 US towards your 2022 expedition. So we will have questions first, but what you'll notice is when the webinar ends, there's going to be a pop-up that will occur, or will appear, I should say. And I'm just going to bring myself back up here. Hi there. There's going to be a pop-up on your screen, and that pop-up is going to ask you which trip would be your dream trip with Adventure Canada. And then you can let us know, and then we will be choosing a random winner from all the entries. So with that said, do you have any questions for me? I don't think I saw anything in the chat box, but if you wanted to unmute yourself, or if you want to save your questions and send them to your travel advisor at TierOne, you can do that, and then we can answer them afterwards. Well, I guess it just means I answered everything, talked about everything. Hi, Shelley.
Hey, Martin. Thank you so much for all of that. That was such an informative presentation. There's just so much that our country can offer, and your company as well. I know personally my bucket list has just grown for sure. So, again, if you do have any questions, please type them in the chat box. But if you don't, I want to thank you all for attending this evening. I know there was a lot to take in. Martin gave us so much information and so many beautiful pictures and so much, like I said, that our country has to offer that we really don't know. So please don't hesitate to reach out to your TierOne travel consultant. And again, Martin, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation.
Oh, my pleasure, Shelley. Hope everybody has a great night. And if it doesn't seem like there's any questions, so yeah, maybe we'll end it there.
Well, thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good night. And don't forget to enter to win.